Beloved, the greatest obstacle in your life may not be fear. It may not be failure. It may not be a lack of opportunity. It may not be a lack of faith. The greatest obstacle in your life may be your ability to hide from yourself. Because as long as you can hide, you can postpone. As long as you can hide, you can negotiate. As long as you can hide, you can remain divided. And division always creates stagnation. Because a life cannot move forward when part of you is pulling backward. A life cannot transform when one part of you wants change and another part of you is still protecting comfort. A life cannot align when your behavior is continuously negotiating with your vision. And I think many people are not stuck. They're hiding behind hesitation, hiding behind uncertainty, hiding behind excuses, hiding behind language that allows them to sound committed without making a decision. And one of the greatest hiding places I've ever discovered in my own life was in a single word. A word that looked harmless, a word that sounded responsible, a word I used for years. And the moment I removed that hiding place, every area of my life changed. Beloved, welcome to Sunday's Talk. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for continuing to invest in your growth, your healing, your awareness, and your becoming. Today, beloved, I want to talk to you about something that transformed me. Because what I'm about to share may sound simple. In fact, it may sound too simple. But I stand on this with every fiber of my being. I am truly passionate about what I'm about to share. You see, I believe there are moments that divide our lives into before and after. Before we become aware, before we told ourselves the truth, before we made a decision, and after. And one of those moments happened when I stopped using this single word. And before I tell you the word, I need you to understand something. This talk is not really about that word. It is about a mindset. It is about a mindset that you will adopt once you remove that word. It is about a way of relating to yourself. It is about what happens when you remove the places where fear hides. You see, it is about what happens when you stop negotiating with your own life. Because what transformed me was not removing that word. What transformed me was removing an entire way of hiding from myself. And once I could no longer hide from myself, I became free. Why? Because I removed the word try. And beloved, I cannot tell you how many times I've sat in therapy groups and heard people say, I'm trying to heal, I'm trying to change, I'm trying to think differently, I'm trying to leave that relationship, I'm trying to forgive, I'm trying to do better. And every single time I hear it, something happens on the inside of me. It's almost like an alarm goes off. And not because I'm judging them, not because I lack compassion, not because I don't understand struggle, because I very well understand struggle. What I'm reacting to is what the word is hiding, the mindset that the word creates. Because try sounds responsible, try sounds humble, try sounds committed, but many times it is none of those things. Many times, try is a hiding place for fear, a hiding place for indecision, a hiding place for avoidance, a hiding place for excuses, a hiding place for the ego. And for many years, I never realized what I was using that word to protect myself from the truth. Because the beautiful thing about saying, I'll try, is that it allows you to sound committed without having to decide. It allows you to sound engaged without ever becoming aligned. It allows you to sound willing while remaining undecided. And one day, beloved, I realized something. You see, the issue is not the word. It's the mindset. You see, the issue is the psychology underneath the word. Because when someone says, I'm trying to heal, this is what I hear. I have not yet decided. When someone says, I'm trying to change, what I hear is, what part of me wants change, but another part of me is still negotiating. When someone says, I'm trying to forgive, what I hear them say is, I have not yet accepted the cost of forgiveness. And beloved, that is not judgment. That is awareness. Because your life changes when your inner world becomes unified. Your life changes when the part of you that wants something stops fighting the part of you that fears it. You see, beloved, your life changes when your behavior stops negotiating with your vision. And I believe that is why so many people feel stuck. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack talent, not because they lack potential. They are internally divided. Part of them wants healing, while the other part of them wants familiarity. Part of them wants freedom, and part of them wants comfort. Part of them wants transformation, and part of them wants to remain the same. And division always produces stagnation. I'll say that again. Division will always produce stagnation. That's why this word became so important to me, while I'm so passionate about it, because I discovered that the word try was giving my division a place to hide. And once I saw it, I could not unsee it. Because the more I listened to myself, the more I realized that try had become the psychological escape hatch. It gave me somewhere to run when I didn't want to tell myself the truth. And beloved, the truth is what transforms us. Not pretending, not performing, not wishing, not hoping. Truth. And during that season of my life, one of the scriptures that convicted me so deeply was Proverbs 18:21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. And that wisdom matters because words do more than describe your reality. They can shape the way we think, choose, and move. And for years, I thought that scripture was only talking about what I spoke over myself. But eventually I realized something, that it is not just about what you speak. It is also about what your language allows you to avoid. Because language does not merely communicate. Language conditions. Language shapes identity. Language shapes expectation. Language shapes behavior. Language shapes what you believe is possible. And every time I said the word try, I was reinforcing a certain mindset. A mindset of hesitation, a mindset of negotiation, a mindset of uncertainty, a mindset of division. And eventually I became exhausted. Not because life was difficult. Life has always had its challenges. I became exhausted from negotiating with myself. I became exhausted from standing between two decisions. I became exhausted from saying I wanted something while simultaneously avoiding what it required. And one day I had a realization The reason I felt stuck was not because I lacked opportunity. The reason I felt stuck was not because I lacked potential. The reason I felt stuck was not because God was withholding something from me. The reason Tanzania felt stuck was because I was still in conversation with things that required a decision. Beloved, some things cannot be negotiated. Some things must be decided. Some things do not need another prayer. They need a decision. Some things do not need another journal entry. They need a decision. Some things do not need another year of contemplation. They need a decision. And the moment I removed the word try, I was forced into honesty, not motivation, honesty, not inspiration, but honesty. Because once try was gone, I had to ask myself different questions. Am I doing it or am I not? Am I committed or am I not? Am I willing or am I not? Am I aligned or am I not? And what changed my life was not the answer. What changed my life was the willingness to hear the answer. Because for the first time, I stopped hiding. For the first time, I stopped pretending. For the first time, I stopped creating the illusion of progress. For the first time, I stopped confusing intention with commitment. And here's where many people misunderstand me. Because when I say you either do or you don't, many people may hear judgment. Many people may hear criticism. You may hear shame, but that is not what I mean. When I say you either do or you don't, I am not inviting you into judgment. I'm inviting you into curiosity. That's the invitation. Because if you don't, that is not a reason to attack yourself. If you don't, that is not a reason to condemn yourself, to be judgmental towards yourself. If you don't, that is not a reason to call yourself a failure. If you don't, then investigate. If you don't, then get curious. If you don't, then tell yourself the truth. Because sometimes the reason you are not doing it is not because you are lazy. Sometimes the reason is fear. Sometimes the reason is grief. Sometimes the reason is overwhelm. Sometimes the reason is that your nervous system does not yet feel safe inside the change you want. And sometimes the reason is that you are protecting yourself. And sometimes the reason is that you are avoiding discomfort. Sometimes the reason is that the cost is higher than you are willing to pay at this season in your life. And sometimes the reason is that you do not actually want it yet. And beloved, that is a truth many people are terrified to admit. Because we have been taught that wanting something and actually being committed to something are the same thing, and they are not. Desire and decision are not the same thing. And that realization changed my entire life. And beloved, I think many people are waiting for a life that can only be reached through a decision. Not another wish, not another intention, not another conversation, a decision. Because there are some things God will reveal, but there are other things that can only be discovered through movement. And that has been true throughout my entire life. You see, every major transformation I have ever experienced happened on the other side of a decision. Not certainty, a decision. Not fearlessness, a decision. Not perfect conditions, a decision. And one of the clearest examples was my move from New York to Miami. The profound part of that story is not that I moved. You see, I always knew I wanted to leave New York. I was ready for a different chapter. The profound part is that I did not try to move. I moved. And because I moved, I encountered a version of myself I never would have met had I stayed. Because once I arrived, life became harder before it became better. There were moments when my savings began to disappear. There were moments when I questioned myself. There were moments when I felt alone and afraid. There were moments when I found myself in one of the darkest, and I mean darkest season of my life. And if all I was looking for was comfort, I will call that season a mistake. But it wasn't. It was an invitation, because it was in that darkness that I encountered God in a way that I never had before. You see, it was in that darkness that I discovered a deeper dependency, a deeper trust, a deeper faith, a deeper relationship with myself, and a deeper and more profound relationship with God. You see, it was in that darkness that I began living more fully into my calling. And looking back now, I understand something that I could not understand then. You see, the gift was never Miami. The gift was who I became because I moved. And beloved, that is why I am so passionate about this conversation and removing the word try. Because every time I hear someone say I'm trying, I wonder what version of themselves is waiting on the other side of a decision. What healing is waiting on the other side of a decision? What freedom is waiting on the other side of a decision? What calling, beloved, is waiting on the other side of a decision? What encounter with God is waiting on the other side of a decision? Because there are dimensions of your life that cannot be reached through negotiation. There are dimensions of your healing that cannot be reached through negotiations. There are dimensions of your becoming that cannot be reached through negotiations. And there are encounters with God that cannot happen while you are standing still, arguing with what you already know. Because faith is not merely believing. Faith is moving. Faith is responding. Faith is saying yes to what God has already revealed. And every time I removed negotiation from my life, God revealed another version of me. A stronger version, a wiser version, a freer version, a more aligned version. Not because the path was easy, but because the decision created movement. And movement created becoming. And movement created growth. And beloved, I think that is where many people become trapped. Not because they do not know, but because they already know. They know the conversation they need to have. They know the boundaries they need to establish. They know the healing they need to pursue. They know the habits they need to release. They know the steps they need to take. The issue is not awareness. The issue is alignment. Because awareness without action creates frustration. Awareness without movement creates suffering. Awareness without alignment creates internal conflict. And eventually that conflict becomes exhausting. because there is nothing more exhausting than continuously negotiating with what you already know. And I wonder how many people are praying for clarity when clarity is not what they need. I wonder how many people are asking God for another sign when God has already spoken. I wonder how many people are asking for confirmation when what they really need is courage. Because eventually there comes a moment when prayer must become participation. A moment when belief must become behavior. A moment when vision must become movement. A moment when knowing must become doing. Because faith is not merely believing that God can. Faith is being willing to move when God says go. Faith is being willing to release what no longer serves your becoming. Faith is being willing to trust what you cannot see. And beloved, I believe there are people listening to me right now who already know. You already know what needs to change. You already know what needs to be released. You already know what decisions have been waiting for your yes. Not your try, your yes. You already know what conversations you have been avoiding. You already know what boundaries you keep postponing. You already know. And I'm not saying the decision will be easy. I'm not saying the path will be comfortable. And I'm not saying you will have all the answers, by no means. I'm not saying fear will disappear, because fear may still be present. Questions may still be present. Uncertainty may still be present. But do not confuse the presence of fear with the absence of direction. Because sometimes the very thing that frightens you is the doorway to your next becoming. Sometimes the thing you are resisting is the very thing that is wanting you to introduce you to a new version of yourself. And sometimes the thing you keep praying about is waiting for your participation. Beloved, God will reveal, but you must respond. God will illuminate, but you must walk. God will invite, but you must choose. And that is why I no longer live my life through negotiation, because I have learned that every major blessing in my life was hidden behind a decision. Not a try, a decision. Every major lesson was hidden behind a decision. Every major transformation was hidden behind a decision. Every major deeper encounter with God was hidden behind a decision. And had I stayed, I would have missed the version of myself that was waiting in Miami. Had I stayed, I would have missed the faith that was forged in the struggle. Had I stayed in New York, I would have missed the dependency, the trust, the calling, the becoming that was placed on my life. And beloved, I wonder, what is waiting for you? What version of you is waiting on the other side of your decision? Your yes. What healing is waiting on the other side of your decision? Your yes. What freedom is waiting on the other side of your decision? Your yes. What purpose is waiting on the other side of your decision? What encounter with God is waiting on the other side of your decision? Because there are some things that cannot be learned through observation. They can only be learned through participation. There are some things that cannot be discovered through contemplation. They can only be discovered through movement. And there are some versions of yourself that will never be revealed while you are standing still, negotiating, trying. So today, I want to leave you with a question. What do you really already know? Not what are you hoping for, not what are you waiting for, not what are you praying for. What do you already know? What truth have you been avoiding? What decision have you been postponing? What conversation have you been delaying? What steps have been waiting for your courage? Because, beloved, your life changes when your behavior stops negotiating with your vision. Your life changes when your actions come into agreement and alignment with your spirit already knows. And your life changes when you stop hiding, stop postponing, stop negotiating, stop pretending. And when you finally say yes to what has been calling you all along, because every major transformation begins on the other side of a decision. When you say yes, not that I'll try, yes. Amen and amen. Beloved, I want to thank you for joining me on today. Until next time, I love you to life. And if this is your first time, subscribe. And if you like this message and it spoke to your spirit, drop me a comment. Hit that like button. God bless.